Hi folks,
Hi.
how are we doing today?
Good.
Super. So we are all about 101 of tea making this afternoon. Before I get into it, I would like to do a little land acknowledgement. We are on the unceded territory of the Ganyangahaga people of Turtle Island, otherwise known as the Mohawk Nation. This was once their land, and it's always important to recognize that before we do anything, especially talking about plant medicine here in North America, Turtle Island. So for today, I'm just going to ask everyone quickly to kind of share where's their tea knowledge at. Do you not like tea? Are you more of a coffee person? Do you have a favorite? Do you have a favorite herb? Have you ever picked your own tea, or are you kind of the person just to get whatever's at the market? Rosemary, would you like to start? We'll just go around this way.
All right. I like chamomile, which I grow in my garden.
Mm-hmm.
I like lemon balm, which Mark introduced me to, and mint, obviously. I don't know if it's obvious, but to me it is.
Super. Thanks.
As Mark know, I'm more a coffee person. I try all kinds of new things since I joined the gardens, and I'm starting to like it.
Super. Thanks.
The homework's a thing.
Me, I like more like black and green tea mixed with fruits.
Mm-hmm.
So that's usually
Super. Where do you get those from?
well, like markets.
Uh-huh.
I don't grow.
Uh-huh. Very cool. Okay, thank you.
Yeah. So I love tea. I stopped drinking coffee a little while ago, and I love herbal teas, and I love to grow them, and I love to harvest my own teas and dry them and save them and drink them in the winter. But I always like to learn about all different other kinds of teas.
Mm-hmm.
You like honeybush, right?
I love honeybush. I love exotic teas, things that come from. I love to drink a lot of rooibos, but probably my favorite right now is red raspberry leaf and nettle.
Red raspberry leaf and nettle. Mm-hmm.
I love tea. I can't drink coffee. I have tea every day. There's so many different kinds, but I really love nettle. Like Mark, I'm a nettle fan, and I make a nutritious tea and drink it every day. I like energizing teas and teas that are good for digestion and also respiratory health. But I am not so much into calming teas because, I'm a calm person. So I don't like chamomile. I like the taste of chamomile, but I never drink it because it's just too calming for me.
Fair enough. Fair enough. So let's just do some clarifications, because tea is a drink and it's also a plant. Tea, you mentioned black tea and green tea, so this is your plant known as Camellia sinensis, which originally comes from northern China. It's now grown in over 40 different countries around the world. Traditionally, it's a tree that sometimes grows 2,000, 3,000 years old. There's like monasteries in northern China where folks are still like sitting around drinking the tea and kind of meditating with the plant. Pretty powerful stuff. And then, there's us in our common day. We wake up, make a black tea, and there's none of the ritual or ceremony around it, and we do it to get us up out of bed in the morning, and that's okay as well. So for the purpose of today's workshop, we are not talking anymore about green tea or Camellia sinensis when I mention tea. That's black tea, green tea. We cannot grow it comfortably in Canada unless you have a greenhouse and are willing to spend a lot of money to heat it over the winter time. So we are focusing on more of the medicinal tea plants that grow here in Quebec. I have a variety of things to share this afternoon, sorry. And before I get into the individual plants, and we're going to taste some teas, I'd like to talk a little bit about harvesting first of all, and drying and keeping, and then we're going to get into tasting, mixing, and then you're going to go home with some little tea bags to try for yourselves. Yeah. So when it comes to harvesting a plant, can anyone tell me what are some of the things that we want to take into consideration when we're harvesting?
Whether the plant is flowered already.
Whether the plant is flowered already. This is a good one, yeah.
How many You
Right.
don't want to take all of it. So
Okay, how much of the plant, especially if we're harvesting in the wild? This is, sure, your mum might be annoyed if you come and, cut all her roses down at the same time to make it into tea.
But you
And
do want it to regenerate, though.
yes, you do want it to regenerate. So we want to be knowing how much we can take sustainably. Yeah, this is good. Any other
Where
considerations?
you would cut.
Where we would cut, good, like the technicality of harvesting itself. Any other ideas?
Whether it's poisonous or not.
Whether it's poisonous
Good
or not,
one.
this is good. We don't want to take any weird trips with our plants necessarily. So knowing your plants and the poisonous ones around us is a good thing to know. Any other considerations? Is today, for example, a good day for harvesting?
Not really,
Why not?
because it rained.
Right, it
This
rained.
morning.
It rained yesterday, so what does that mean?
It means that maybe there's too much moisture in the plant and it won't dry fast enough.
Right, okay,
And
so
it might get moldy.
it might get moldy. We're looking for, if there's water on the leaves, it's not a good time to harvest. Also, at the moment, it's pretty cloudy, the sun isn't shining, and indeed, like, I just cut this flower. If the sun was shining, there would be more medicinal components in this flower. Because if you think about it, what's the flower's purpose? Reproduction, how does it do that? Attracting pollinators. One of the ways that plants attract pollinators is their showy petals. Another way they do it is their aroma. They have oils in them that when the sun is out, the sun like bakes the leaf, and the aromas are carried on the wind, and it attracts certain pollinating insects and other certain mammals too, as well as birds. So by cutting this on a cloudy day, there's not so much heat to like bring out the oils of the plant. Another thing to consider in the similar vein is the time of day as well. And you can get really complicated. There's also the moon cycles as well. On a full moon, there's actually more in the plant because the gravitational pull of the moon is there. Like if you do a harvest with a new moon and a harvest on a full moon, you'll notice a difference in the weight if you harvest the same amount of plant material. So we don't have to get so complicated. Like it's a cloudy day, this is still going to make really good tea. I'm not too concerned, but these are all very good things to keep in mind. When it comes to harvesting in the wild, we generally want to take about 5% of a plant, which if there's 20 flowers, you can take one of those flowers for yourself. And I know I was taught in the Ganyegahagan culture that they never pick the first plant that they see. They say the first plant is for everybody, and then you can pick the second time that you see it. And from a conservational point of view, this is actually a really nice idea, because if you see the plant, you're really excited and you cut it and you pick it, and then you don't find another one that might have been the only plant that you took out of that ecosystem. Whereas if you leave the first one, you're sure to know that there's at least another one if you come to harvest it that will continue to grow and populate the ecosystem. So, pretty simple stuff. Now, technique of harvesting. You mentioned about flowering. Now, not always do we want flowering plants. Sometimes we want just leaf, sometimes we want flower, and really the times of harvest, and sometimes we want seeds. The times of harvesting, it's pretty simple stuff. If you're looking for the leaves, you want them when there's no flowers. If you're looking for flowers, it's when they're fully open. If you're looking for seeds, it's when they're brown and crispy and ready to fall off the plant. And these are kind of the windows that you harvest. And luckily we have quite a few different windows. Like for leaf matter, you can harvest in the spring or you can harvest in the fall. The good leaves will grow again. Now this is a beautifully colorful, I can see all the colors are vibrant. None of this is a little bit old. Sometimes you might start, like you find a flower and it's already half germinated and pollinated, and like the seeds will be brown around here. It's not the best moment for harvesting, but this is a beautiful example here. So let's see. Another thing we want to keep in consideration is making sure the plant looks healthy as well. If there's brown spots, if there's a lot of insect pressure, we don't necessarily want to put that in our cup of tea. Sure, insects are an extra bit of protein, why not? But generally speaking, we don't want bugs in our tea. generally speaking.
Not your cup of tea, Mark?
Not your cup of tea. Bring on the puns. So, talking about harvesting. First of all, I brought some tools here. You've got your secateurs right here. These are perfect for cutting simple leaf material, and indeed even you can make, there's a lot of trees out there that you can turn into teas. We have our linden tree right here. This is one of my favorites for picking the flowers of and turning them into tea. Cedar tea, pine tea, you want something with a bit more bite in order to comfortably cut the branches. The worst thing that you can do to a plant is come to the plant unprepared and just tear off a piece, and you leave a wound on the branch there as you tear it off, and it kind of rips the bark off. You want a nice clean cut that is respectful to the plant. I have here, this is a Japanese rice knife. It's a serrated sickle, and this is particularly good for harvesting large amounts of tender plant material. I'm not going to harvest a tree with this, but a low-growing plant you can quite easily come through and cut. And then there's just your good old scissors as well, which work quite well too. Now, when it comes to harvesting, technically wise, all we really want to think about is a bit of garden botanics here. So, does anyone know where the leaves come out from the stem? What do we call this part of the plant? These two should know.
Nœud or collar?
It's very, you've got it in French.
In French it's nœud, like a
Oui.
knot, like
A node.
Node,
A
sorry.
node. Very good. Okay. So, basically, the reason that we want to know about the nodes here, and this is a good example that Rosemary picked earlier. We can see here, this with the stem is an example of how not to harvest. Someone's come along, it's no problem. Basically, and this is something I learned only after like a year of working with plants, is that the stem is as medicinal as the leaf and the flower. Sure, it's not as tender or as tasty, but all the medicinal constituents that are in here, they all come out to the flower and the leaf itself. So the stem is as good as the rest of the plant. So here, what's going to happen is someone's come along, cut the main flowering stem here. This piece of stem, given time, is just going to turn brown and then fall off the plant. And it's a wasted opportunity. So when we harvest, we're always harvesting down to the node. So essentially, say for example, I'm looking at this herb here. I want to harvest the top for tea. I come down to the node, cut it off there, and then I know that this right here, I've gotten the most I can. You can see the nice bit of stem there that's going to make good tea for me right here. And this is basically how we want to harvest. So this is something to keep in mind with harvesting. If you have the time to do individual stems, this is great. I was a farmer once upon a time, so I would use my sickle, just grab a handful and cut straight away, and I wasn't being so careful as to whether I was getting at the node or not every time. But if we have the time to do it, and you're kind of working at your own pace, not trying to make a living out of farming, which is hard work, we want to make sure we're harvesting at the node. Some other things to keep in mind is where the flower is at. So right here, are these young flowers or old flowers? Young. We can see that because they're pretty small and there's no yet open petals. This is a basil right here, and essentially basils are kind of cool because they'll get bigger and bigger as they get older, and the bottom of the flower opens first, and then basically you can tell how old a basil flower is because once the flowers at the very top are opening, then it's at the end of its life cycle, and you'll actually notice the ones at the bottom will start turning into seeds generally before the ones at the top have finished opening. So we could have left this for a bit longer to harvest, not a problem. This one right here, Anise hyssop's a little bit different. We can see here there's multiple different flowers open here, and this is a perfect time for harvesting. They open all at the same time. And we have
holy basil or just
this one here.
it looks like holy basil.
Yeah, it's holy basil. Yep. It's a bit hard to tell without. We've got about 5 or 6 different varieties of basil here.
But regular basil is good. You can take the flowers for tea.
100%, yeah. Regular basil is one of my favorites for tea as well. I'll often use the tea to make pestos and sauerkrauts as well. Instead of water and salt, I'll make a basil tea and salt, and then use that to ferment with, and it adds a whole other level of flavor. So when it comes to drying, I'm just going to make our first tea here. We'll start with the basil, because why not? When it comes to drying herbs, has anyone tried drying their herbs at home? And how do folks do it?
I did with the last batch you gave me for
Yep,
tea.
yep.
I turned it upside down
Okay.
and hang it with a rope.
Yep. Bit of string. Okay. So turning it upside down. It's kind of the classic like herbalist picture where you have your herbs hanging up around your kitchen. Very good. Any other ways?
Put them in big brown paper bags. from the grocery store.
Big brown paper bags, like that's freshly harvested. Okay, very good. Brown paper bags work because paper bags are breathable. If you were to use a plastic bag, you would not end up with a dry plant.
I like to shake it up once in a while though, because sometimes as they dry, they sort of compact in the bag, and then
Right.
they don't dry evenly. So I like to shake it up once in a while.
We also have the drying rack.
We also have a drying rack. Yeah.
I need space for that.
Drying racks are quite easy to find online, and essentially they're just platforms that have perforated fabric that you can lay your herb on, and it allows it to breathe. Kind of the thing we are looking for when we're drying our herbs, number one, keeping it away from the sun. There's a few herbs you want to dry with the sun, but generally speaking, the moment it's cut, the sun is not your friend. Like lemon balm, left in the sun, it'll turn brown and it'll actually burn. And so once it's cut, and this is like goes the same like if you're out in the field or out in the forest and you're harvesting, you want to keep your herbs covered up, not just left in a basket in the sun all afternoon. So keeping them away from the sun, keeping them away from heat. I know some people use dehydrators to dry their herbs, or they'll put them in the oven, like with the light on, the pilot light on, but I find that really not so necessary unless time is really important. These will air dry by themselves within 3 to 5 days, generally speaking, a herb like this. No heat necessary. Airflow is kind of important, but only if you have a large amount. Like if it's quite thick, you want to make sure that there's like a fan, or it's not completely still, or you get in there and you move things around every day, just once a day, to make sure that the stuff on the middle isn't staying in the middle and starting to go moldy. Is there anything else? I don't think so. It's really heat and sun are the two things that are going to make your herbs lose their potential a lot faster. Some herbs like lemon balm, I've read that after 6 months it's going to lose its flavor, but I've had lemon balm at home a year or two after harvesting and it's still pretty good. The reason you'll is because when it dries, the oils start losing, evaporating, and then you end up basically with stuff that just tastes pretty bland, like just bland plant material. If it has no smell, if it has no flavor, then you know that your herb's done and it's time to put it in the compost pile. Some other things to keep in mind: once it's dry, I like to chop it up a little bit so it's easy to store. But when I'm drying it, I don't generally chop it up beforehand. Like once it's dry, it's easier just to kind of smush it up and break it up in a nice big bowl, which is what we're going to be doing in a short while. Some other things to keep in mind: if we're working with like big flowers or roots, these take a lot longer to dry. So we want to, roots, you want to make sure they're cut generally thumb-sized pieces or smaller. And with flowers, we want to make sure that they're completely dry in the inside. Once your plant is dry, it's generally a good idea to seal them either in a paper bag, or I like to use glass jars, in a nice airtight seal. That way you don't have the air kind of breaking down your herbs as time goes by. If it's in a sealed container, it's a lot less reactive. Got to make sure though that it's 100% dry. And the way that you do that, number one, is just by looking. Really, I learn if a plant's dry or not by getting in there and feeling it, and also listening to it. There'll be a dry rustle to plants, like a nice sound that doesn't happen if it's a little bit damp still. So that's something to keep in mind. And yeah, the worst that's going to happen is your plants are going to go moldy, and you'll see that sometimes. I've had that happen sometimes. It's a bit sad. And the other thing, if you leave them on the drying rack a bit too long, you might get insects coming in and eating your herbs. The little moths, I forget what kind of moth they are. They're a great one for coming in and eating your herbs. Another fun story I should mention. I harvested a bunch of calendula blossoms one year, and I had quite a lot, so I ended up putting a drying rack close to our bed where we sleep. And I woke up in the middle of the night with little tiny inchworms, little tiny caterpillars crawling up my leg, because some insects do like to lay their eggs on flowers and then they hatch later on. So a nice way to avoid this: cut your herb. Cut your herb. Generally, if I have the time to lay it outside for an hour or two to let the insects have time to come off. And then if you're drying certain things, don't dry it in your bedroom. These insects will crawl away and do their own things within time. They're not going to cause any problems. I have a little laundry room in the back. You have a question?
Yeah. Is that only for big quantities? Because I'm drying like just a little bit. Should I be worried also?
I wouldn't be too concerned though. It's generally like having a large amount of herb and there's a lot of insects around, like that's something that you might end up with a few bugs in your kitchen here and there, but that's okay, generally speaking.
Thank you, Mark.
No worries, thank you for coming. So, we are going to try our first tea now, and you're going to have a cup here, which you're going to keep for yourselves. So, this is... Oh. So this right here, this is holy basil. And as you saw, I made it not even 10 minutes ago, and let's give you a little bit because it's easier to cool down. Now when it comes to like letting teas steep, medicinal, like herbal teas are pretty simple. If it's got a strong aroma, like a strong smell, it's not going to take too long to infuse. 5-10 minutes, you're good to go. You can leave these things much longer, and generally they're not going to get too bitter. If you find your herbs turned into a bitter, astringent mess, then you know to not leave it too long next time. Other herbs that don't have a strong... Other herbs that don't have a strong aroma, we generally want to leave for a long time because they're more nutritional plants. But we're not really working with nutritional ones because they don't make so good teas. Or they do make good teas, but it's in a different way. Fresh or dry, this is pretty much going to taste the same as well. So this is a plant called Ocimum sanctum, or Ocimum teniflorum. This is holy basil or tulsi. There's 20 different species of holy basil. We have 3 in the gardens at the moment. And what
Krishna one?
we don't have Krishna
Because I
this
have seeds.
You
If
do.
if you want some.
I grew some last year. That's a beautiful one, the Krishna. That's a purple one.
Yeah.
We
It's harder to grow though, I think, because it's more
Yes.
exotic.
Yeah. We have the Ram or Tulsi here. We have a temperate Tulsi, and then we have a Van or Tulsi as well. What do people think of this tea?
So
Pretty
this
tasty?
Is one of my favorites.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Cold is also good.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Tincture is good as well.
Yeah.
It just tastes really good.
Holy basil cocktails, yes please. So you mentioned cold teas. How did you do your cold tea before?
The same as the hot, but then I put it in the fridge.
Okay. So you used not quite this, because not hot water, but like tap water, room temperature water, or
No,
did
I
you make it
think
hot and then put it in?
yeah.
Okay. So fair enough. Right. So you can make a hot tea and keep it in the fridge. It'll last 3-4 days. Have you ever tried so this is known as a hot infusion. Have you ever tried a cold infusion?
Yes, all the time in the summer.
Right.
Yeah, just put it in
Okay.
water and put it in the fridge.
With mint, I do that.
Right. Okay. So another way that we can try our teas is fresh herb. This one really only works with fresh herb, I find. Chopping it up, room temperature water, leaving it in the fridge overnight, and then you've got yourself a cold infusion. and this can be as strong as a hot one. I was really surprised the first time I tried this. I was like, cold water is not going to do anything, but it just needs a lot more time. But eventually that tea will be as powerful as a hot made tea, and a cold infusion is able to pull out different things that hot water can't necessarily.
And it will keep longer?
And it will keep longer. Yeah, that's a good point.
After a week, maybe?
Yeah, in the fridge, very happily, yeah.
So, for example, the holy basil that we're just drinking now, what kind of impact would that have on our system?
So what are the medicinal effects of holy basil? Do you have any ideas?
There's so many, but calming.
Calming.
Good for digestion. Maybe antibacterial.
Antibacterial, for sure. Essentially, what we can do is we start at the macro level, which is look at what family it's in. Basil is a mint plant. It's related to your peppermints, your chocolate mints, and all the other mints out there. And all three of these are in the mint family. So what are the common properties of the mint family? Number one, it's good for digestion. Does anyone know? Let's see if we can get all of the herbs that we use in cooking that are in the mint family.
So you said
Oregano,
Basil, oregano, thyme, mint, catnip, if you use that in cooking, sure.
I'm just trying to think of all the mint family plants. Savory.
Savory, sarriette, yeah.
What about sage?
Sage, yes.
Yeah.
How about estragon?
Estragon, yep.
Yeah.
Rosemary.
True. It's in the mint family,
Yeah,
rosemary?
yeah. Are there any others? I believe we said thyme.
Yeah.
I think that's about
Lemon balm.
it. Lemon balm, sure, if you want to cook with that, why
You
not?
can put it in salads.
Yeah, it's pretty tasty.
Yeah.
So essentially, if you didn't know already, like your lavender too, like sage, lemon balm, rosemary, thyme, these are all cooking culinary herbs. There's no difference between medicinal and culinary herbs. It's just the culinary herbs are tastier, perhaps. We all cook with the mint family so much because they help aid digestion, particularly when it comes to like fatty foods. Like there's so many recipes out there for fish with sage, or fish with thyme, or lamb with rosemary. Like there's a reason that these have been recipes for thousands of years, is because they work well together to help your body break them down. So aiding digestion, relieving flatulence is another one. Like any of these seeds or any of these teas used, it will help. If you've eaten a big old poutine and you're really suffering, the mints can be a really good friend in that regard. They are antibacterial too. Like the reason that peppermint is added to toothpaste a lot is not only and there's a reason why we enjoy minty fresh breath, is because the menthol is quite a powerful antibacterial agent. So if your bad breath is caused by too much bacteria in the mouth, so using a bit of minty toothpaste or eating some fresh mint, you're helping fight that bacteria because it has antibacterial properties. Some other things about the mints, aside from botanical similarities, medicinally, helps relieve cramps as well. This is both...
Yes.
Yes. This is both for stomach cramps and menstrual cramps and any other kind of tension. Some people get headaches because their shoulders and their necks too tense, so we can try rubbing maybe some oil that's been infused with some mint leaves on our shoulders. We actually got a mint oil that we made last time.
Mint on your temples are amazing for headaches.
Right.
Yeah.
Even
essential oil.
even the plant itself, just smushing it up and rubbing it on your temples can really help relieve. That's a squeaky lawnmower.
This is going to be great on the video.
I'm kind of glad that his lawnmower is broken, because he ran over our oak tree.
What?
Yeah. There was it was cut, but it was still growing, and then all of the leaves had been cut down, and it was and his lawnmower was right after it. So I have a feeling that he ran it over and broke it.
Karma is called.
Yeah. Sorry, the tree will be back. It's a tough tree. Okay, so that's properties of the mint family. Coming into the holy basil. Is this still recording?
It is. is, yeah.
Super. Okay. Coming into holy basil itself, this has a particular affinity for the lungs. So if we've got a cough or some kind of congestion in the lungs, there's a lot of aroma in here. There's a lot of oils that help open up the lungs. And I have
you
indeed.
can smoke it.
Yes, I've even heard of people putting this in their cigarettes or rolling this up in a pipe and smoking it. And
In India, they do that a lot.
correct. In India, this is considered. It's called holy basil because in India and Nepal, this is a reincarnation of their Hindu gods. And so it's treated with a lot of respect. You have to say prayers before you water it. You have to wash your hands before you harvest it. And it's really quite an important plant for their culture. And here we are in Quebec, drinking it willy-nilly, but that's okay. That's okay.
We
can
washed
enjoy
our
it
hands,
too.
though.
We did wash our hands, yes. We'll pay our respects in our own ways, yeah. And then another thing I remember reading about holy basil is particularly good. It's what's known as an adaptogen.
Yes.
An adaptogen herb is a herb that allows our bodies to respond better to stress. So this has a particular effect on helping reduce the cortisol levels. Cortisol is your stress hormone. So by drinking this, we're able to be a little bit more chill, which is pretty good. So, does anyone want a bit more?
And it also it gives you energy if you need energy, and it's calming if you're too energized.
Right,
That's what
right.
adaptogens do.
A little bit more. I'm gonna pour this out and try a new tea next.
Thank you.
My pleasure. Okay. I'll rinse this out. All right, next tea. Let's go for Agastache. Go for it.
So like medicinal herbs, like let's say if someone is on like medication
Right?
on a daily basis, do they interact with the medication?
Good question. So this is an important thing to know. Like, yes, there are some herbs out there that will interact with medications, and some of them even. And then it's not just medications we want to think about, but maybe vulnerable people as well. There's a little acronym I made. It's called Pembe, Pemby, and basically anyone can anyone think there's 5 there? What are the 5 kind of groups of people that we want to think about before we really start doing anything with health in general, not just
Pregnant.
herbs? Pregnancy, so that's the P. The word Pembe, Pemby. Each one of these stands for a particular at-risk group. Elderlies, very good, or your elders, so pregnancy, elderly. The M is medications.
Okay.
B,
Babies.
babies, that's close. What do we have to do to babies?
Breastfeed.
Breastfeeding, okay, so that's the B, and then the Y is young people,
Oh, I was gonna say youth.
okay? So, as you're,
What about it? What about
these are basically 5 groups of people. We want to be extra certain that we are using the right herbs and they aren't going to have any interactions. For example, chamomile tea is safe for the majority of the population. However, for ladies in 3rd trimester or more, it can cause false contractions. So it's like you wouldn't think that a calming herb could do that. Oh, like the wasps after the dried herb. That's cute. So making sure that we know that our bodies are safe and that the herbs we're using are safe to go with them is an important thing.